Hi everyone, I'm Kathleen Ennis-Durstine, Manager Chaplaincy Services at Children's National Hospital, and I am really honored to be in this time and this place with Rabbi Dr. Joel Brooks, who joins us to help us understand the upcoming Jewish festival of Passover. Joel, welcome.
Hi, great
Hi.
to be here.
Great to have you with us again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. All right. Passover begins in just a few days from now.
Just a few days, Friday night.
Friday night. Can you give us a little bit of the scriptural and historical significance and history, meaning of Passover?
Absolutely. So Passover is a holiday that we celebrate the exodus from ancient Egypt, when the Israelites, the Hebrews, the Jews were slaves in Egypt and for 400 years. And after that time, God took us out of Egypt, redeemed us, and brought us into the desert, where we received the Torah and wandered. And it's a holiday, it's very important significance in that we always, every year, have to remember that we were redeemed at this time, at this place, on this month, on the 14th day of Nisan, the Hebrew month, which for us is the start of, Rosh Hashanah is the traditional start of the calendar year,
okay.
But this is actually considered the new year from the month standpoint. Spring, it's the rebirth, and so every year we remember the Exodus.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So how does a Jewish family prepare for Passover?
A lot of cleaning, actually.
A lot of cleaning, okay.
Take spring cleaning to a whole new level.
Oh, okay.
So traditionally, over the 8 days of Passover, we do not eat leavened bread, so traditional breads and grains that historically could be made into a bread-like substance, we avoid. And so anything that kind of comes in contact with that, we remove from our homes. And so that requires quite a bit of cleaning.
I can only imagine.
Back in the day, my mom actually had me go through individual books in our house and actually wipe down each page.
Wow.
It was a little excessive, but
wow.
The idea is both physically we remove what's called chametz, or that's the word we use for the foods and the materials that are not kosher for Passover, that have the bread in them. And also spiritually, though, it's not simply a time that we spring clean. It's actually a time for us to actually consider ourselves and think about our own deeds, our own actions, and consider them and try to remove that sin, the things that we do, and try to improve ourselves as well. So it's both a physical cleaning as well as meant to be a spiritual time, spiritual cleaning.
I understand. Pretty meaningful then, in many ways. What is the significance of removing the leavened bread? So,
when the Jews left Egypt, they left in such a rush that they didn't have time for the bread to rise. And so that is where the unleavened bread comes from. So the traditional matzah that we eat did not have a chance to rise. And so to this day, the matzah that we eat has to be prepared, has to all be made within 18 minutes before it even has a chance to rise. Once it does, it's no longer considered kosher or a food that we can eat over Passover if it goes longer than that time.
Okay.
And so the laws of what makes food kosher over Passover actually are slightly more stringent in the sense that no food can come into contact, and it's all watched very carefully in order to ensure that it does not become contaminated, for lack of a better word, with bread or substances like bread.
Okay. So apparently the dough that was ready to cook had to be cooked very quickly in order to be taken along with them, because they didn't know how long they were going to be gone or where they were going?
Exactly. So they had to prepare their food, but they were rushed out of Egypt with such speed that never had a chance to rise.
Okay, I understand. So the first day of Passover, my understanding has always been that there is a special meal to begin that celebration.
It's called the Seder, the Passover Seder. And Seder translates into order.
Order.
And that's because it's both a special meal, but it's not just the meal, but it's the whole service of the evening is all meant to be ordered. And so the first night we have a Seder, and the second night as well we have a Seder as well. And that is meant to be symbolic for the process, and it's really nice in the sense that it's meant to both commemorate and remind us of leaving Egypt. But the reason why we have such specific order is not simply from a ritual standpoint, but it's also to encourage the children and guests that are part of the meal to ask questions and to become part of it. It's not a simple storytelling, but it's meant to be an interactive experience to relive. And so that's why it's a Seder. It's an order. It's multiple parts. And so it begins with the Kaddish, the blessing over the wine. And then there are multiple stages. There's Orchatz, where we break the matzah, and the youngest at the table gets to go hide it eventually to claim a prize at the end. There's Karapas. Sorry, misspoke. The Orchatz is the washing of the hands first. Have to be clean. But we do that especially without a blessing. Normally, we ritually, when we wash our hands, we do it with the blessing. And when we do Orchatz, we do it without.
Because?
That's an excellent question. That's the first question we try to encourage asking. And it's because both from a cleanliness standpoint, as well as spiritually to prepare ourselves for the meal. And it leads right into Karpas, where we take a vegetable. The Karpas itself represents the fruit, vegetables, what's grown, the life cycle. So a symbol of hope and rebirth. And we take the Karpas, we dip it into salt water. Salt water to remind us of the bitter years and the bitter tears that we cried as slaves. And after that, we have Yachatz, the breaking of the middle matzah. And that gets hidden. Followed by Magid, the story of the Passover, where we retell. Followed by Rachsa, which is the washing of the hands, this time with a blessing. And the reason why we make the blessing is because after that comes Motzi Matzah, the eating of the matzah, where we make the blessing on the matzah. Followed by Maror, the eating of the bitter herb to remind us of the bitter times. Followed by Korech, where we actually eat the matzah and the bitter herb together, almost like a sandwich. And that is meant to fulfill the commandment of eating the matzah and the maror, the bitter herb and the matzah together. And then we have Shulchan Aruch, everybody's favorite, the meal.
So this is not the meal that you were describing.
So this is all part of it. It's all one. It's all the order of the evening.
I see.
So the actual meal part comes much later into it.
I see.
So you've worked up quite the appetite at that point. And then after that, we say Safon, where the youngest one who hid the matzah, which we call the afikomen, gets to ransom it for usually some kind of prize. As the youngest in my family, it worked out pretty well for me.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
And followed by Bariach, where we make the blessing after and say grace after the meal, thanking God for the meal and for bringing us to this point. Followed by Hallel, praising God. And finally, Nirtza, the end, the conclusion of the Seder.
All right. I can certainly understand that concept of order as you describe it. Very ordered. What I'm picturing is this Seder plate, and you've brought us an example tonight, is part of the larger meal. Is that right? Then there would be probably a full meal at some point within all of this other order and ritual.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So the Seder Plate itself is meant to remind us and commemorate each different aspect of the evening.
Okay.
So each thing kind of has a different representation.
Uh-huh.
So we'll start with the, this is meant to be a shank bone, or it's meant a lamb's, part of a lamb, or
Okay.
most will use a chicken.
Okay.
For those who don't have lamb. But what this is meant to be is it commemorates the Passover offering that was brought beginning in Egypt and then throughout the generations of the temple in Israel, where we ate the Passover offering to commemorate God passing over the houses of the Jews in Egypt before bringing us out.
Okay. Okay. So the lamb shank.
Lamb shank.
Okay.
Followed by, this apple is meant to commemorate the charoset, or the, it's a quite delicious actually, a fruity mix of apples, pears, some wine, some nuts. It turns into a paste, and it's meant to actually represent mortar.
Okay.
To remind us of the bricks and the clay that we made as slaves.
I understand. Wow. Okay.
And
that leafy green up there.
So the leafy green is the karpas, the vegetable, to symbolize joy and rebirth and renewal. As crops grow in the spring, so too we remember and we ourselves brought out from slavery into joy and rebirth as new people.
Okay. Okay.
And then over here we have the maror. This is meant, I think that's, not quite sure what this is supposed to be.
Is that a horseradish?
Horseradish, probably.
Horseradish?
It's a, so it's horseradish traditionally what's used. Some will also use romaine lettuce. And use the stem, the bitterness. So it's the bitter herb that we eat to remind us of the bitter times.
Okay. Okay.
And next we have here, this is an egg actually.
Okay.
And the egg is meant to remind us of there was a special offering that was brought every Passover and all holidays, which we no longer bring, but this reminds us of it. The egg also symbolizes as a circle, the circle of life, and the aspect of renewal.
All right.
And finally, we have this, which is the karpas, or the vegetable, which again, the growing fruit, the growing vegetable, the renewal, the rebirth every spring.
Okay. All right. I'm getting a much stronger sense of that order that you described at the outset. So let's take it one step further. I understand that there is a specific part of the ritual where there are children who actually ask questions or encouraged to ask questions. Are they specific, or can they be whatever the child has a question about?
Whatever the child has a question about.
Okay.
This whole evening, the Seder, the order, every single aspect of this evening is meant for one purpose, and one purpose only: to get involved, to get the children to ask questions, to get them involved, to get them interested, to make them a part of the experience, and feel that they're a part of the experience. So everything we do this evening is meant for the children. It's meant to carry on the generations. There's a special commandment for Passover. The commandment is in Hebrew, and you should tell your children on this day what happened. And that's the crux of everything that we do this evening. It's that everything we do, the questions, and there's the traditional 4 questions, which we can sing or we can just go over.
Okay.
Traditionally, the youngest one sings it.
Sings it? Okay.
At the table. And what those are is, that's just a sampling of the questions that were meant to be asked. But the key aspect, and what the Manishtana, or what those questions are, is that it's all meant to to lead towards one thing. What's different about tonight? What are we doing tonight? What are we part of tonight? So the more questions that are asked, the better. That's what we encourage.
Okay. What is the most unique question that you have ever heard a child ask that you're willing to share with us?
Oh, good question. That's a good question. The most unique, I'm not sure, because as the youngest, I'm usually the one who does ask the question.
Okay.
I have to say, a lot of it for me, the most unique questions I've always had is where the customs for specific foods come from. Like the horseradish or romaine lettuce or potatoes or parsley. Different vegetables are used, and also, how did those become what was accepted? And interestingly enough, the answer I got most from my grandparents were that these were the foods that they had available, and the foods that were, and that every generation there's always a slight change to some aspect of the Seder, because whereas we now have access to any kind of vegetable we want, in ancient times, and even not that long ago, turn of the century, and that it wasn't so easy to get the different kinds of vegetables, and so whereas we have variety now, they didn't.
It's interesting to me that with a ritual so ancient and so storied and so heavy with tradition, that there is this acceptance and room for sort of the evolution of it. Is that?
There is, and that's actually really important, because but it all I think kind of circles back to this same concept of we have to imagine that we were brought out of Egypt. So in every generation, every year, we need to feel, every Passover, we need to feel that we were the ones that were redeemed. And so what it takes for us to get to that point is that evolution. Whereas we are so steeped in tradition, there's so much order and things that we follow, but there's also so much room to add on to that tradition. And the reason for that is because we need to feel that we were part of that process. We were the ones redeemed. And so there's a lot of room for kind of adjusting and bringing in new traditions, as well as, and combining that with the old.
Okay. Well, Joel, I really want to thank you for sharing with us today. And before we sort of wrap up, I want to make sure that I haven't forgotten anything or left anything out. Is there anything else that we should try to understand about this really special festival and holy time in Judaism?
I think so, because this what is the aspect of Passover? What is and going to that particular portion of the Seder, the Magid, the telling over of the story of Passover. What does it begin with? It begins with the traditional 4 questions. Aman Ishtana, what makes this night different from all other nights?
Okay.
And the answer is, the answer that follows the 4 questions is, Avadim hayinu Pharaoh b'Mitzrayim. And we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. And then we were redeemed. And so, why do we say that every year? What's the importance of it? Is it just a historical event? Are we just celebrating? Are we commemorating?
Right.
Or is it more than that? Is it a call to action? Is it a call to remember and feel like we are the ones being redeemed? The story, the Magid continues with, even if we were all wise men, sages, learned scholars, no matter who we are, we have to remember that we were slaves in Egypt and that we were redeemed. Why? Once again, are we just celebrating a historical event? Certainly there's, there are important events, but what is this commandment to feel like we're part of it and we ourselves get redeemed every year? I think the reason for that is because in every generation, there is always a call to action. We were redeemed. We were slaves once. We need to remember that. And then we need to remember that we were once redeemed as well. And so in every generation, there's an inequality, there's injustice. It's on us. We have to remember that. And then we have to remember that we have to do something about it. Just like we were redeemed once. It's our job to remember that, to feel as though we were redeemed, to not become complacent, and to also work to redeem others, to fight the injustice, to fight the inequality in the world.
Okay.
That's our job. And I think that's what Passover is coming to tell us. At the end, remembering each year, to feel that we're being redeemed each year, is that just like we were redeemed and fortunate enough, so too there are those who aren't fortunate that we have to work and we have to help redeem.
So redemption is not only a gift, it's a responsibility.
Exactly. It's a responsibility that we have towards ourselves and towards others.
Okay. All right. And what is the appropriate greeting for Passover?
Well, happy Passover is always acceptable.
Okay.
Happy holidays. In Hebrew, we say Chag Sameach, or a happy festival, happy holidays.
Okay.
So happy Passover is probably the most common that we use.
Is the most common. Well, Joel, thank you again, and happy Passover.
Thank you so much. It was great, and thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.
Great to be here.
Thank you so much. I hope you've learned some interesting tidbits about Passover, or kind of reunited with some things that you once knew and maybe didn't remember as well. I hope we will all take some time to remember that our sense of redemption is not only that gift, but a responsibility going forward. Thank you again.